Welcome to our next episode of In Safe Hands. This is our podcast where we interview people involved in safeguarding, and today we are welcoming Adam Evans, who is the CEO of Staffordshire FA. So welcome, Adam.
Thank you very much.
You've worked here a long time.
Cool. Thanks for that. Nice
You
one.
have.
Nice one to start with.
You have. Tell me a little bit about your journey from when you started to where you are now.
Okay, so you've got that out straight away.
Yep.
I started with the association, just over 25 years ago now. In that time, I think I've done virtually every position possible, which actually includes safeguarding. And I've also managed the safeguarding position in my previous role of operations manager. So I had a number of roles before I got into the CEO. Started as an administration officer. I then moved into referees and competitions. I then became county secretary, operations manager when I directly managed the safeguarding position. And then in 2016, I was honoured and privileged, and still am, and very proud to become the CEO of Staffordshire FA.
I like it.
Thank you.
I've been there for quite a lot of it as well.
You have indeed.
And I've watched you move on from role to role.
Yeah.
So, what does safeguarding mean to you? I guess both just as an individual, but also as your role as CEO here.
Ultimately, it's fundamental to everything that we do within the game. You know, we're dealing with grassroots football. I would say 70% of the football that we oversee is junior football, youth football. So it's absolutely, it's imperative that we lead from the front in terms of safeguarding. Safeguarding, we talk about it at Staffordshire FA as one of our two non-negotiables. So our two non-negotiables are inclusion and safeguarding. And if we wish to cascade it down to the game, to support the game, we have to make sure things are right from the top. Safeguarding is sometimes misunderstood, and I think, going back to my time when I first started here, it was misunderstood, and as much as I don't think this was anybody in particular as issue as such, but it wasn't taken seriously, and it wasn't taken seriously for a long time within the game. I think it was something that people were scared of, safeguarding, and I think that is in some cases is still the same, but I think our job is to make sure that it's not a scary subject. Thinking back to those times and times when I was managing the safeguarding position, and there were times when I was actually taking on the role myself, it was to try and get it embedded was difficult. It was almost seen as, okay, you're in charge of safeguarding is your responsibility. And I think over the years, what we've tried to do here, and I think what clubs do now very well in a lot of respects, is it's not just one person's responsibility, it's a responsibility for everybody. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the key. It's everybody's responsibility. It's to be aware. It's to, when we talk about decisions here, what we don't want to do is make decisions and then think about safeguarding after that. What we want is safeguarding to be a consideration in every decision that we make.
It can be quite a lonely role, can't it? I know when you were managing it directly, and you've seen with some of the cases, I guess, that I've had to deal with sometimes, it can feel quite lonely. As much as we deal with, level cases, which are still not great, and we get a lot of them. When you get that massive case come in, how important is it that there's a support network around the safeguarding team here, and also, I guess, for the safeguarding teams within their clubs?
I think it's absolutely vital. I think one of the real things that you did find early on, particularly with safeguarding, is, like I've just said, it was a siloed position. Early on as well, it would be tick boxing county FAs. There's no doubt of that, and we've got to be honest with it. But I think that then goes down through the clubs as well, because we were seeing it as that. I think the clubs saw that as well. So what that inevitably does then is puts pressure on the person that's put in position to oversee safeguarding. It's like everything else, and I often talk about the position here and your position, and Jan Scott before, one of the things I used to say was, in a footballing sense, it has to be a defensive midfielder position. And I mean that because it pulls all the strings, it leads on safeguarding, so you lead on safeguarding. but you would not be able to do the job effectively as what you wanted to do unless everybody was a safeguarding officer in their own right. You put it together, but it's got to form part of everybody's roles, and I don't think that's any different in clubs. I think what happened to start with was, we need to get a safeguarding or welfare officer in place. So-and-so, you're the welfare officer, leave welfare to them. It's got to be a whole club or a whole organisation thing. That person pulls it together, that person's the lead on it, but also ultimately everybody's got a part to play.
And I do think it's really important that we link both us as an association and clubs. Obviously we embed it as an association, leagues embed it within their leagues, clubs embed it within their clubs, but it is like a triangle. It is important that we all still work together. I know that, like when I first started in the role, I created the working group, which has got sort of 6 or 7 club and league safeguarding welfare officers that we meet every other month, but we've got a WhatsApp group and we chat, throughout the weeks, and it's a way for them to check and challenge me, which I need, but also to offer almost that one-to-one support, and for them to help shape the discussions that we have in our club and league welfare officer meetings, the things that we maybe need to be looking at. They're the eyes and ears on the ground, aren't they? And I know when I first started and I talked to you about creating this group, it was so that there was a constant link between the association and the leagues and the clubs, so that messages that we're getting out and support aren't just kept internal, but that we are still relevant and we're dealing with the things that the clubs and the leagues think that we actually need to deal with. So I know we've gone off on a bit of a tangent and I've sort of nicked the mic for a little bit, but I think from my point of view, I was really grateful that you supported me in helping us get that working group set up so that it was a collective rather than we work in silo, the league work in silo and the club work in silo. So
yeah, and I think that's another misconception of roles in general, not just safeguarding. I know if I use an example or an analogy that we have, there are 50 other county FAs. As a CEO, I have a lonely job, I would say, and I'm not, it's not here sitting well with me, but ultimately, I'm here to lead. I'm here to make sure that we've got the environment in place for the things that you've just discussed, really. But I need to talk to other people too. So, a network of CEOs is amazing for me. So I will talk, I've got relationships with a lot of other CEOs around the country. At the end of the day, we're doing the same things, but we need to learn off each other and we can get practical ideas from each other. I think it's no different in safeguarding, and I think what you've set up in Safe Hands is a brilliant piece of work. And I'm not just saying that because you sat here, but we've talked about this quite often. It is a lonely place, and like I've said, it is natural for people to back off from subjects. So therefore, in theory, they're backing off from those people who are leading it, and that's a dangerous thing. But we used to think about clubs as rivals. Clubs aren't rivals in the context of this. We're all trying to do the same thing. We've got the same purpose. We're trying to create safe environments where everybody can enjoy the game of football. And ultimately, if welfare officers can get together, whether they're the league welfare officers, whether they're club welfare officers, anything, whether they can get together and speak. And I've sat on some of your focus groups, and I think it's brilliant because people, you can see them it's like the light bulb moment. Oh yeah, I'm going through this too. I've seen that. Oh, how can I tackle this? And then people are willing to share their ideas. It becomes a community, and I've always said, and we say it here, one of the biggest things that a human being needs is a sense of belonging. And ultimately, if people feel like they belong, they're going to be interacting more, they're going to learn more, they're going to be better in their roles, they're going to become better people from it. So, no, I can't speak highly enough of what you've done there, because I think it's really, really important that people realise that they're not on their own. They can share ideas. Sharing good practice is good too. It's not just about taking good practice. Talk about the things that you're doing well in your club, and whilst you might think it's the norm, to somebody else, that will be an amazing story, and that will help, and that in itself gives validation and confidence to the stuff that you're doing.
I think the confidence is a massive piece, isn't it? And not that you ever want any clubs to go through having to deal with any big cases, but very often you find once the welfare officers had to deal with an incident or a case or a low-level concern, they get their confidence up a little bit more, and they realise that actually there is support out there, so they're not having to go through it alone. So yeah, I do think that's really important.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you wouldn't wish
No,
a
you
difficult
wouldn't.
case on everybody.
No.
It's about being prepared for it. And unfortunately, well, I say unfortunately, really you only get confidence from doing things consistently, and ultimately you get confidence from your actions. So it's important to practice these things. And I'm not talking about the high level cases, but it will put you in better stead for, God forbid, anything happens. And I think it's just that awareness around it. You know, what you don't want, particularly at a league or a club, is something landing big. Obviously that's the first thing you don't want, but what would be even worse if then really you weren't in a situation where you knew what to do, and then it becomes a lonely place, and then if you haven't got the right people around you that thinking safeguarding's yours, you get on with this, that is as dangerous for the individual as well. And you know, just talking, it's not about me, but you know, I took on the role as for an interim period of safeguarding lead here, and one of the things, well, it was an experience that I had, and one of the things I brought into, you know, particularly with Jan and with yourself, when we talk about, I didn't want anybody to go through anything like that, because at the time, this was a good, I don't know, it was early 2010, something like that, 2012, we at county FAs weren't allowed to talk about our experiences if we got a case. We weren't allowed to talk to them, anybody within the office. It was, yes, okay, you did a little bit with case management at the Football Association, but basically you took it on yourself. At the time, and again going off piste a little bit, because I'd played cricket for, I don't know, 25 years, and I was the sort of person that didn't miss a game. Our family holidays were outside the season, etc., etc. I was there every game as long as I could be, as if, you know, obviously if there was things like injury or something really important came up, I was there, but generally I was there. And I went through a period where for some reason I lost all inclination to play the game. A game I loved, and for about 3 weeks, and I was captain of a team at the time, and the lads in the team thought that I was letting them down. Again, that's a bigger picture about understanding, you know, what's going on in other people's lives, but you know, they quite rightly they thought I was letting them down. I'd lost all inclination to play, and I didn't understand why, and it wasn't until after the seriousness of the case that I was dealing with, I realised, you know, I was keeping it all in here and I couldn't let it go. And because of that, it affected the thing that I loved, and I just couldn't get myself up to play the game. Now I've thought about it after, and I realised, and I've processed that, I've understood it. But one of my big promises to myself and to this organisation, I know you and I have talked about this many times, is that we wouldn't allow that to happen here to anybody again. We've actually put a framework in place where I don't think that would happen, and I hope, feel very supportive with the people around you, the framework that we've got in place. But it's just as important that this happens in leagues and clubs too, because again, if we, you know, and I'm not saying they aren't, it wouldn't be purposeful if they did, but handing it over to somebody, what are they going through, what are they hearing, how do they feel? You always, it's like yourself, you know, you've got a chain of people that you can speak to. You've got other safeguarding officers from other counties, but ultimately you know that there's people here that you can speak to. We're aware of every single case, we talk through it. It is so important to talk it through. And that time, there were times that have gone now, thank goodness, and you know, thinking back that you couldn't talk about it was frankly ridiculous. And we moved on from that, thank goodness.
We have. That kind of leads me nicely into the Staffordshire Way. Now I know that whilst we all understand what the Staffordshire Way is internally here, I imagine that there's people out there that are watching this thinking, I've got no idea what Vicky's talking about. So you're the person that started the Staffordshire Way. It was your baby almost. So what is it? For their benefit, not for my benefit.
It was the Staffordshire Ways group.
Okay.
They came, well, it was just something that we came up with. Effectively, it's talking about culture. It's what it is we believe in localism, we believe in identity, we believe in belonging, and what we wanted to do is create something here at Staffordshire that could be replicated across the county, but we wanted to feel like, you know, you see everything around us. We're Staffordshire and we're proud to be Staffordshire. We wanted to bring that into the way that we work, and it is effectively the Staffordshire way of working. It's called the Staffordshire Way deliberately because of obviously the path that we've got from north to south or south to north, that is a bit of an identity piece. How does this connect to safeguarding? Well, it's based on psychological safety to start with. I know that sounds a bit mumbo-jumbo-ish, but effectively what we believe in here is that you should feel psychologically safe in the workplace. And where it connects to safeguarding is that, again, a safeguarding officer, a welfare officer, should feel psychologically safe, but so should everybody within that club. And when I talk about everybody within that club, everybody should feel safe to ask questions, to be curious and ask questions around safeguarding. Everybody should feel safe to discuss safeguarding openly. But most importantly, for children from vulnerable adults, it then, we think, would then lead into people feel comfortable about asking questions, about speaking out about things. We quite often, and it's the same to what we try and achieve here. In that psychological safety, we talk about, it's okay to make mistakes. And again, that's relevant to safeguarding in general, because safeguarding isn't just the one end of the scale that we all talk about, which is really important, which is ultimately what we're trying to prevent. We're trying to make it safe. It's about how children feel when they turn up for a game of football, they turn up for a training session. Do they feel safe to make mistakes, or do they feel under pressure? And I think this is something that clubs are becoming acutely aware of now. So whilst we're doing it here, what I believe is that if we if that's in our behaviours from Staffordshire FA, we're just a part of Staffordshire football. We don't sit above it. We're part of Staffordshire football, as our leagues, as our clubs, as our referees, as our players, as our coaches, etc. But if we show an example, set an example from that, then hopefully that goes right the way through the game. I think it's so important, because it is so easy at times to, if a girl or a boy makes a mistake when they play out from the back, for instance, and then they get shouted at, then they stop doing it. The key thing to enjoying, the key thing for people being involved in the game, feeling safe in the game, is they've got to enjoy it. At the end of the day, what we do here is grassroots football, and yes, there'll be the odd child that is lucky enough to be taken on, but effectively they're doing it for enjoyment, they're doing it for life lessons, they're doing it because team sport gives you something that solo sport just can't. But they've got to feel safe in that environment. They've got to feel okay with making a mistake. And I think then if you learn those things early on and you feel okay with it, you take it through life as well. It's effectively our way that we work. The Staffordshire way is our behaviours, our agreed behaviours here, of which, as I've already said, the non-negotiables are inclusion and safeguarding. So everybody here is seen as a safeguarding officer in their own right, but it's the way that we work, but it's based around psychological safety, belonging, and purpose, really. And it's something the team have pulled together themselves.
Yeah, I think, hey, we all live it here. I love it. It's just, I think it's important that anyone watching this gets to understand a little bit more in depth as to internally what we do. I think that's important. So a couple of weeks ago we did our Safeguarding 365 assessment. Now I think a lot of people won't have a clue what this is, so I guess me giving a little bit of insight on it. So every few years every county is assessed, isn't it, for their safeguarding. I don't know whether to get you to go through it or for me to explain it between us. So go on, then you go first.
Yeah, effectively, as I said many years ago, safeguarding wasn't really taken as seriously as what it should have been within football until 2016. Now, 2016, if you remember correctly, that was the year when the survivors were brave enough to come out and speak about their stories. That was the biggest impact that anything could have ever had on safeguarding, because before that people were doing it, they were trying to live it, but didn't understand why. They didn't understand their purpose. And we talk about purpose quite often with it when we work here. You need to understand your purpose. It is key. So when the survivor spoke, it was in November 2016. A purely massive coincidence, I took over as CEO in November 2016. That knocked down all the barriers for us that we'd been fighting against for years. Off the back of that, to get a standard that was right throughout football, a standard came in. So it was the safeguarding standard. And I think, we were assessed early on. That wasn't by the NSPCC at the time, it was by another company. But effectively it was to make sure that the levels were right, it was to make sure that we were doing things correctly, and I think, it's absolutely imperative that these things are in place. it's not the same level as such, but it's basically our Ofsted.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we are coming, the assessors come in and they go through everything that we're doing. But what we found over recent times is counties have got to a certain level, and I like to think that we perform well in this area. But you must never rest on your laurels. But it's a real development piece as well. So to speak to people from the NSPCC, it's fantastic for us because, you know, that's what they do. We can pick up ideas. It's great for validation, particularly for you, because you've now been enrolled for 12 months, effectively. The timing couldn't have been better because we did it a few weeks ago now, and I think that now, you know, we knew the work that you're doing, the impact that you're making, but I think for yourself, it's now giving you validation because we've got a fantastic report, you know, and I'm really, really proud of it. But what it is, it's never a destination. When you have the assessment, it's you know, you've got to keep thinking, you've got to keep curious. How can we improve this? How can we keep moving forward? So next time we're in a position where we've pushed on a little bit more. Fundamentally, I think that the most important thing throughout the assessment is to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to make sure children, vulnerable adults, and everybody is safe to play the game in Staffordshire. That will always be our benchmark. Anything above that is fantastic, but I think, you know, particularly, and I'm particularly proud of the work that you've done around how you've built a little community around it. These podcasts, absolutely incredible because whilst it might be a little less today, but you've had some fantastic guests on here that are talking about lived experience.
Don't play yourself down.
Yeah, but they're talking about lived experiences, and I think, you know, when we go back to the survivors and the difference they made, it was because of their lived experiences, because it became real, so therefore it gave us a purpose. And I think what you're doing now with that, with your groups, getting more and more people involved to talk openly about it, I think that will have a massive impact as well. So it's fantastic to get that report, and I'm really proud of it. I'm really happy for you and the safeguarding team that sit around you as well. So it's a great achievement, but it's a really, really important process that we do. And every, you know, one of the things I'm really proud about is that it's not just you, and I don't mean that's not to do you down.
Team.
The whole team was involved, the whole team were assessed, and then ultimately when the assessors are then feeding back about the culture, you know, you can't make up a culture. A culture is what it is. You know, I can talk to you about us having a fantastic culture. You only see or feel that by being part of it, or, you know, as the assessors put, they felt that it was embedded into our culture. That is the proudest thing for me because, you know, if everybody's taking ownership, if everybody's there, as I said before, if they're considering safeguarding before rather than tagging it on after, we're in a good place. And I think that's where, you know, we need to keep, as much as I said we've just got part to play, we need to lead from the front on this and show an example. And hopefully our members are really proud of the fact that we do that, and the fact that we have got a really brilliant assessment.
I mean, my takeaway from it was, and this was the first assessment that I'd led on. Obviously previously Jan had led on them and I'd been part of that, and it was great, but this felt like a real celebration. I know a lot of counties, we often say, oh, it's quite nerve-wracking, and it should be nerve-wracking in a way, because safeguarding is so important that it's important that we are a bit nervous about it. But my takeaway from it was that it was a massive celebration of everything that we do, not just within the office, but the ripple effect of what our clubs do, what our leagues do, that we are fortunate and lucky enough to be a part of, you know, so we can enjoy the successes with them in the same way that they can enjoy the successes here with us. So I think it was another great example of how closely we all collectively work together. But I do really love the fact that all the staff got to talk to the assessors. That was massive for me. It wasn't just a me and you. I know we're first on the hit list, aren't we, to chat? But it was great that, you know, everyone that all of our listeners speak to in the office, or whether it's on the phone or come and see or do Teams calls with, they all got the opportunity to talk about their jobs and their roles and how safeguard is embedded, right from county cups to finance to Libby, you know, who's recently gone from being an apprentice to being a coordinator, and how safeguarding was part of her role as an apprentice through to where it is now. So I just think that's ace in its own right, isn't it?
Yeah, I remember when safeguarding first came in and we first started having the assessments, it was, you must and again, it was to get us to a point, but you must have safeguarding on the agenda. You must have it in the first 5 items on the agenda. You must have do this. You must have that. And I've always said, and I've said, to you at many occasions, that you don't want to make it a thing.
No.
Because if you're making it a thing, it's a thing, and ultimately, what it should be is, and I know there's the nervousness that we had realistically was. Actually, it doesn't feel like a thing this time.
Yeah.
It feels like,
Yeah.
but that's a good sign because that means you're living it.
Mm.
And ultimately then, if you're living it, you don't need to say it needs to be number 3 on an agenda item. It's it's there, people understand it, they ask questions around it, we're open and talking about it.
Mm.
And that's the point, compliance is absolutely key, and this is what I'd say to the clubs particularly out there. The compliance is key, but it's ultimately how you live it. It's about people. It's not, those have to be in place. The DBS have to be in place. We have to make sure. Those are our compliance piece, but you have to live it with people alongside that. And I think that, again, is the most pleasing thing. And that, if anything, is the key learning from us, is to then pass on to our leagues, on to our clubs about embedding it into your culture. If you can do that, everything else becomes natural. The compliance piece comes natural after it.
I can remember years ago with the compliance piece specifically, we'd have coaches and clubs contacting us, not very happy particularly that they've got to go through the DBS, and they didn't to the point of it, or I'm just a coach, why do I need to get a DBS? This was years ago, don't get me wrong. It's really nice now that people don't even question why they need to go through these things and the reason for it. Obviously it would still worry us a little bit if we did have coaches and clubs saying we don't need DBSs, but that alone, it just shows sort of how things have evolved from years ago, that people fully get it and they understand why they need to do these things. So I guess leading on to my next question. So
Sorry, Vic, can I just say that? I think if you talk about an organisation's culture as well, what you tend to find, if your culture's right, and I know it sounds like buzzwords, and I'm the least. You'll back me up on this. I'm the least corporate person around. I've everything I've learned is come from a dressing room, being around people, understanding people. It's not corporate spiel. But the most important thing with a culture is that you notice things when it's starting to go wrong. So if your culture's right, you do pick up. Because let's face it, the whole point of this, and we've talked about difficult subjects. The worst case scenario, it becomes more of a highlight if your culture's right. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily, a club or an organisation should never fear that, ultimately the compliance is in place. But it's not the actual thing. So if something bad does happen, it's not necessarily the fact that it's happened. That wouldn't be held against the club in any way, shape or form. It's then, have you got everything in place? That's where the compliance comes in. Your culture will probably highlight it, but then your compliance comes into place about how you deal with it. It's like anything else when we talk about community clubs, and when we go for that, and so if there's a discipline, if something happens discipline-wise in a community club, doesn't mean to say you're a bad community club. What that means, have you got the things in place then to be able to deal with those, what's happened, and effectively get back on track as quickly as possible. But if you've got the right culture, it's the same here, it's the same anywhere. You pick up things earlier on, because culture is about behaviours. You start to spot different behaviours early if you have the behaviours in place.
Okay, so obviously looking ahead now, I can see how far we've come. As you said at the start of the podcast, you've been here forever and a day, 25 odd years. I've been here 20 years. So I can see where we've come from and where we're at now. Looking to the future, what would you like to see over the next coming years here at Staffordshire FA? What sort of changes or differences would you like to see?
I think again, it's to be boring. It's to continue embedding it into what we do, so that it's a natural behaviour. I'm not one of these people that talks about we've got to do all these grandeur things, this, that, and the other. We've got to be the best county FA. You'll hear me talk about we've got to be the best version of ourselves for the game in Staffordshire, and that's it really. I think what you've done in bringing that community of safeguarding together. That's where we need to evolve. That's where we need to get more people. How many people can we talk to and make them feel more comfortable about what they're going to deliver going forward? I think from the county FA's perspective, it's to continue to, like I say, to continue to ensure that we are curious, so that we can look at ways in which we can keep developing what we do here. One of the things I think we do, but I think we got scope for doing much more is, and I think this is a key for clubs as well, and I know some clubs do this well, and I think we need to involve, I always talk about, when a few years ago now, we make decisions on youth football, and at the time, were we actually asking questions to youth players? No, it was adults making decisions for youth. That cannot be right in today's society. Generations, as we do some exercises here around generations, they're so different. We need to understand from the children involved and the youth people involved what they want, what will shape, how can we shape going forward. So I think, going back to in a long-winded answer, I think the most important thing for us is to be curious, to understand what's needed. It's a changing world at the moment. Generations are changing a lot from generation to generation. I'm of a Generation X now. How do I relate to Generation Z? We need to understand that, and there's only one way that we're going to do that is by talking and listening.
It's interesting, when we did the podcast with Lily and Phoebe, just hearing their views was a real eye-opener, because I can remember one of the things that one of the girls said was, when there's parents being abusive on the sideline, they just feel like saying, in a nutshell, just shut up, it's our turn now. You've had your moment, you've lived your youth football, let us have our moment now, and just support us. Don't tell us off, don't give us criticism, just be there, clap, be positive. And that's all they want, so that they can have their moment. I found that a really interesting podcast, because you're literally hearing it from the horse's mouth as to what they want, know, and that's how we can look to shape safeguarding. And I think, not that I'm saying don't watch this podcast, absolutely do. However, if you want to hear kids' views, that's a really good podcast to watch, because they were very open and transparent. And I think there's quite a lot we can learn from that.
I think it was a brilliant episode, and I think if you haven't watched it, then do so, because that just sums up everything I've said much more eloquently than what I have. I always remember when I sat on the first youth council that we held, and some of the things were coming out. There were some really simple things as well that...
Little wins, isn't it?
Yeah, it's little wins, but they're important to people.
Yeah.
And that's why we should listen to everything. That's why I keep talking about being curious. We've got to be curious to understand. And, going back as well, obviously that is the most important thing in a kid's game of football. How are they feeling out there? What's going to make their experience better? What's going to prolong their that's going to make them enjoy it and prolong their experience in the game. But likewise, if you do have situations where, and we know, and I say if we do, there are parents that are a little bit more exuberant than we might expect. Why aren't we asking? Are we asking the question to the parents about how they feel? It's easy for us to say that's just showing poor behaviour, but as you know, when we talk about discipline, I think that it needs to go deeper than that. We need to have a better understanding of why people behave like that in an environment. So is it because that's what we see football as? Football is an emotional game.
As we found out at 3 o'clock this morning.
As we found out at 3 o'clock this morning, and if we're a little bit weary-eyed, it's because we watched the Mexico-England game, which was an exciting one, but and emotional. But it's an emotional game, so people are going to be emotional. But we need to understand why do people think it might be okay to say the wrong thing to a child who's refereeing the game? Is that because that's learned behaviour because they've seen it on the TV? Is it pantomime behaviour? Why are they doing it in that environment? And it's easy to say that you shouldn't be doing it in that environment, but like with everything else, we need to understand why before we can get to the crux of it. And I think, if I was saying anything to clubs, for our perspective as well, if I say anything to clubs or leagues, is to we have this thing, don't we, when you come into the office and we don't know what people carry on a daily basis. We always say that. So, if we're going to look at empathy, we need to understand that people are going through different stuff. You carry stories through your life. When people turn up for work here, we think we know people, but do we really? When somebody's having a quiet day, do we understand why? But just asking the question, you okay? That's fine, that's great. But likewise, we can't just see it as bad behaviour. If we want to move forward with it, we need to understand why somebody might be doing that, and are they okay in the first instance? And it might be that they've just said, no, this is the way you act at a game of football because I've always seen it since I was so high. But is that right? But education is absolutely key with that, and we need to, through what you're doing, we need to get the message out there, and the welfare officers at leagues and clubs as well. We need to help them to get that message across and to be approachable, so that people can say, we can ask them, are they okay? And then if something does come up, then we can try and help.
No, I love that. You've sort of stolen my last question, because I was going to say if there was one message you could give as a final thought, I guess, for the podcast. I don't know if that is your final thought about the why, or if you've got anything that you want to give as like a one last takeaway.
I think it would be going back to what we've spoke about all the way through. It's really important that safeguarding is not a standalone. It's not something that sits outside. And we talked about it again. I talk about us here because we're living it every day, but it's got to be that we talk about that what we can do here. Yes, okay, there's paid members of staff, but this is what we see as a good model for safeguarding moving forward. It can't be standalone. It's got to be part of the game. And I know I challenge our safeguarding leads to say, I want safeguarding to be part of football, as is referees, as our coaches, as are everything else that comes in the game. It's just part of it, and I think we're succeeding in getting that. I think the clubs and the leagues are doing a fantastic job, and then when I go back to the point, that then will highlight anything that comes up, because the most important thing, there are, my default is always people are good, and that, and I say that people are good, but we need to be in a position to deal with when something isn't good. And we don't want to read about those serious cases retrospectively. We've got to put everything in place to deal with it proactively, and that's what we've got to try and do. And that's what I would say to clubs. I might say to clubs and the leagues, don't let your safeguarding lead stand alone. Be there for them. Be part of the committee. Be part of the bigger picture, the decision-making body, but don't silo it off saying safeguarding, that's Vicky's job. Because if I was to do that, I'd be massively letting you down. If the apprentice here did that to you, she's massively letting you down. It's got to be a team effort. And again, if we go back to it, look at the purpose of it. Why are we doing this? We're keeping people safe. Most importantly, we want people to enjoy the game. If they're going to enjoy the game, it has to be a safe environment. So ultimately, you go back to your purpose, and that's what it's got to be about. I don't know whether that's practical advice, but effectively, I think I've just basically...
It's a great takeaway.
I think, I think it's just basically what we've talked about all the way through, isn't it? It's and just so that it's doing your best that you can. And again, I don't want to say culture, embedding, because it feels like buzzwords. Just make it part of your club. That it's an okay subject. It's okay to talk about safeguarding. It's okay to talk about the subject matters, and we feel comfortable about doing it. And I think if you were to have a look at yourself, because what we always talk about here is critically analysing yourself. How do people within your club or your organisation, how do they feel? Are they content? And if we're really honest with ourselves, are they content about talking about these, safeguarding? Are they okay with asking questions?
It's funny, I get, just as like a finishing for me, I guess, the amount of phone calls I get from welfare officers or other club members about safeguarding, and one of the opening lines, I'm really sorry to have to ask.
Yeah.
And I said, don't be sorry, there is no stupid question at all. I don't care what you ask me. If I don't have the answer, I'll find you the answer. I'm never going to make it up. And I won't always know the answer, as you well know. I don't always. But I'll get you the answer. But there is never a stupid question, especially when it comes to safeguarding.
If you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And ultimately, again, vulnerability is a brilliant value to have. And you have to be vulnerable, or allow yourself to be vulnerable in a safeguarding environment. It's okay to ask. It's okay to say that you don't know. We talked about having a safe environment earlier on. It's okay to say that you don't know. I encourage the team here, if they don't know the answer, say that you don't know, and you will find out for that person. It is so important that anybody involved, particularly as a volunteer, feels absolutely safe to phone up and say, nothing is a stupid question you've said.
No.
You do not know until you know.
Yeah.
And you might not know, but you'll find the answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or we'll find, and again, going back to your group, we'll find somebody who's
Somebody will.
lived it
Yeah.
and can help.
Yeah.
And I think that would be the thing, is you just don't sit there alone. Speak out. Contact us. Speak to people. Don't keep it in. It's okay to talk about this subject matter.
Thank you. Well, thank you for chatting to me.
No problem.
Hope you all enjoyed this podcast, and we'll see you at the next one.